All right, folks, welcome to today's Saturday session where we're going to be covering a very complicated but beneficial topic of how to enhance your answers at junior cycle geography. So I'd like to just welcome you all to today's Saturday session by introducing you to ExamRevision. If you haven't heard of ExamRevision before, it's an exam revision based company. It provides video lessons, PowerPoints, H1 and distinction level notes. It provides my favorite feature on the platform is the self-correcting quizzes that students can self-assess and check their own knowledge against topic that they've just revised, and it provides lots of direct links to exam situations that are going to directly improve your quality of answers and hopefully your results in any subject that you can really think of. So if you haven't heard of ExamRevision, I'll take you through it towards the end of the session, but head on over to that website there and you'll see lots of different content and resources available to improve across all your range of subjects. Back to today's session. Today's session is going to be focused around junior cycle geography. It's focused around enhancing your answers, so how to improve the structure and therefore improve the marks that you receive for each answer that you undertake in junior cycle geography. The structure of today's session is going to provide multiple opportunities for you guys to answer exam questions. So if I'm being 100% honest with you, the best way that you can benefit from today's session isn't by just listening to me spiel on or talk about my answers or how to enhance your answers. The best way for you to improve over the course of the next hour is for you to take part in the session. And I don't want you to take notes as I'm talking. I'd like you to listen when I talk, and I'm going to provide multiple opportunities for you to actually complete exam questions with success criteria that I give you after seeing a sample answer from what we cover. So the base of today's session, hopefully you'll answer 3 or 4 different questions and you'll enhance your ability to answer any question that comes up at junior cycle geography. So before we get into the depths of things, the first thing that we need to look at is the structure of exam questions at junior cycle geography. So if you've watched any other Saturday sessions before, I've probably covered this in the past, but it's really important to see what I'm talking about as we engage in or as we progress throughout the session today. So if we look at the typical question at junior cycle geography, there's a very standard or typical structure to that question that we can anticipate to see. So the first thing that you'll see on every single question at junior cycle geography is an example of a source or a piece of stimulus. So that source or piece of stimulus could be a newspaper article, it could be a graph, it could be an aerial photo, could be a diagram from some different topic. So that source or piece of stimulus is going to act as that kind of first step into the topic that the question is going to be about. So it's really important you take time to analyze and take in that source or stimulus. We're going to come back to that now in 1 second. Quite often or not, after that source or stimulus, what you'll see is a comprehension based question. So that comprehension based question is testing your ability to analyze or understand the source or stimulus that's came ahead of it. So comprehension means understand. So can you understand that source or stimulus? After you answer a comprehension-based question, there's usually a connection-based question. So I call it a connection-based question because this question here is going to bridge the gap between the source or stimulus that you're looking at and the knowledge that you're going to need to answer a question at junior cycle geography. So the knowledge-based question is going to test your knowledge. Sometimes, I suppose there's going to be, just to kind of show you the rest of the structure, depending on the question, there could be 1 knowledge-based question, there could be 3 knowledge-based questions, there could be 6 knowledge-based questions. There's no set amount of knowledge-based questions per question. So for an example here, I'm going to say that there's 3 knowledge-based questions. So the knowledge-based questions, or the first knowledge-based question, I'm going to call it 1, 2, and 3. The first knowledge-based question that you're asked usually is directly related to the source or stimulus that you've been provided. So for example, let's take an example of an exam style question that we might look at here, like rivers. So our topic's rivers. The source or stimulus that we're given, it might be a diagram of a waterfall. So the source or stimulus, you're given your diagram of a waterfall. And then the comprehension based question, what might be to label one feature or one correctly label one part of the waterfall. The connection based question there might be to name one process of erosion. So it's providing a connection between the source and stimulus and the knowledge that you're going to be asked. So you have to name one process of erosion that results in the formation of waterfalls. You might say hydraulic action. Your second or your first knowledge-based question then might be to explain the formation of a waterfall using the diagram as a guide. And then your second knowledge-based question, this is where the questions at junior cycle can become a little bit more difficult, because what they try to follow is a non-linear approach. What that means is that not every single part of the question is directly linked to the topic that we're covering. So after we've answered our first knowledge-based question, now the question might, it might not be about rivers anymore. It might be about, I suppose, economic impacts of flooding in an area. And then your third knowledge-based question might be about renewable energy. And it's important to understand the structure of exam questions at junior cycle geography and that they follow this non-linear approach, because it means that we can't just say as teachers, study one topic and you're going to be fine in the exam, or this topic's going to come up. Because although this source or stimulus was about rivers, and there were knowledge-based questions regarding rivers on the question, you can see as we got further down the question, the non-linear approach usually means that it increased in difficulty. And by the end of the question, you're being asked to discuss about economic geography, renewable energy. It might link in with hydroelectricity here. But the non-linear approach means that the questions increase in difficulty, and it means that not just one topic is linked to one question. And that's going to be important to understand, because you as young geographers and junior cycle geographers need to be able to provide connections between the different topics and understand how each topic in geography connects to the next, and that's going to be important. So if we have a quick look at a type of exam question that comes up here, you can see we're given our source of stimulus. We've got our connection-based question here labeling the aerial photograph. You've got a question around tourism there, so tertiary economic activity. So your first knowledge-based questions about tertiary economic activity. Then your second questions there is linked to coastal landscapes, where it's about explaining process of longshore drift or coastal transportation. Then you've got a sketch map towards the end, and then you've got urban functions and evidence from aerial photographs and OS maps. So you can see that non-linear approach in action, where we've got multiple different topics in one question, and it's testing our ability to connect our knowledge as junior cycle geographers, and that's going to be really important. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about before we quickly dive into enhancing our answers in junior cycle geography is the marking scheme. Now, this is a document that you would never have looked at before. There's no reason why you should have looked at, but I'm going to try to break that down, this document, and explain what it tells us it tells me as a junior cycle geography teacher, and what it tells you as junior cycle geography students. So the most important kind of thing that we could take away from the marking scheme is the most common marks that are awarded at junior cycle geography, because they're going to provide us with information that tells us, or basically tells us, what we need to do in order to achieve full marks and to enhance our answers. So there's multiple different marks available in junior cycle geography, but the most common marks are as follows. So the first mark that we're going to talk about is a naming mark. So you'll get 2 marks if you name a process, landform, or impact in relation to the question that's being asked. Second mark that's available, I'm going to call it VP2. It's called a valid point. So if you provide a valid point that's directly linked to the name process, landform, or impact that you've given, you'll get 2 additional marks in your answer. Next mark that we're going to talk about is a VP3. So it's called a valid point explained. So a valid point explained is worth 3 marks. It's the highest amount of marks that you'll achieve for at junior cycle geography. And the valid point explained usually means that you've given your name process, given a name, process, landform, or impact. You've provided a valid point about that name, process, landform, or impact, and then it means that you've elaborated that valid point to a higher level. So you've explained it fully and brought it to a more elaborate level. So to achieve your VP3, it most of the time is going to be your 3rd, 4th, or 5th sentence, and it's going to mean that you've elaborated fully on your answer, fully developed your answer. We're going to come back to that idea next. Fourth type of mark available is your evidence referred to marks. It's worth 2 marks. So if you've been given a question on aerial photograph, if you've been given a question on an OS map, you need to refer directly to that, and you get 2 marks for saying we can see that in the aerial photograph as, I suppose if you just give 4-figure grid reference of V2246, we can see that there's a train station available or something along those lines. There's also 2 marks available at times for a valid diagram. If there's no marks available for a diagram inside the marking scheme, sometimes those diagrams or the diagrams that you draw can be worth a VP2, so you'll get 2 marks for your drawing your diagram. That's going to be important because it means that we don't need to spend 15 minutes drawing a diagram, because they're only going to be worth 2 marks. So we need to be quick, neat with our diagrams. We need to label our diagrams correctly, but they don't need to be pieces of art, and that's going to be important. And then lastly, you get 2 marks for an example provided in the exam. And I suppose these most common marks are important because if we follow them down the line, and if we're thinking about the most common marks that are awarded when we're writing our answers, it's going to enable us to enhance our answers, because it tells us what our answers need to achieve full marks. I'm going to come back to that now in 1 second. So the marking scheme, or the most common marks awarded, are important because it tells us lots of information as junior cycle geography students. Firstly, it tells us how to structure our answers. We need to name something, make a valid point, explain a valid point, refer to evidence, and refer to examples. They're the 5 things that we need to be doing. So if I go through those now in 1 second with you, I'm going to come back to those. Second thing we need to do, or it tells us, is what type of sentences that we need to write. So we need to write short, sharp, concise sentences. I'm going to come back to that now in 1 second. Third thing, it tells us how long our answers should be. Well, it doesn't directly tell us that, but it gives us an indication by the amount of marks awarded to each question. So junior cycle or longer style questions in junior cycle geography can range from anywhere from what we've seen so far, 9 to 16, 18 marks. And that's just something that will dictate how long it will be. Now, the junior cycle geography exam is created in a way that it gives you an assigned amount of space to each question. That should be the first indication of how long your answer should be. Fourthly, it also tells us what type of information we need in our answers. So it tells us if we need to refer to evidence, give examples, if we need to explain or fully develop on our answers. And that's going to be really important. To go back to number 1 here, how to structure our answers. What the biggest thing there, the biggest takeaway we can take away from this marking scheme is how we need to structure our answers in junior cycle geography. So we need to name a landform, process, or feature that we see. We need to make a valid point regarding that process, landform, or feature, process, landform, or feature. Then we need to explain that valid point that we've made reference to. We need to give examples of where that's occurring in real life. And sometimes, I'm going to draw a line, because sometimes we need to refer to evidence from an aerial photograph, from an OS map, from a graph, to support our answer with data or references, and that's going to be really important. So if you can take away one thing from today's session, one of the biggest things that we need to start thinking about in junior cycle geography is structuring our answers in this way in order to enhance and achieve full marks in our answers. So in order to, I suppose the marking scheme tells us that we need to write short, sharp, concise sentences in junior cycle geography. It also tells us that we need to fully develop and explain our answers, and that means that we need to provide more information. So we need to be thinking to ourselves, what does this mean? How can I elaborate on this further? What else do I know about this in order to enhance and bring that to a more advanced level? We need to provide evidence to support our answers. Data, statistics, and facts are going to be important, especially if you're talking about an economic impact of a hurricane. You need to be able to say what amount of damage or how much damage was caused. You need to be able to give a figure, statistic, or fact about that. So you could say $15 million worth of damage was caused as a result of Hurricane Katrina or something along those lines. When space is provided, we need to draw diagrams, but I'm going to place an asterisk beside this, because when we draw diagrams, we don't spend 15 minutes on them. There were 2 marks, so we need to think about, okay, how can I maximize my time here? So spending 15 minutes on a diagram for 2 marks isn't going to be the best use of your time in the exam. And it also tells us when asked to use a map or aerial photograph or a piece of stimulus, we need to refer to it and use it in our answers. So we need to make direct reference to evidence from the OS map, and that's going to be really important. We're going to come back to that today. Okay, consequently, the marking scheme also tells us that we have to write small in order to achieve full marks in junior cycle geography. We need to be aiming for 10 to 12 words per line, and that's going to be really important because, as I kind of briefly talked about, and you're going to see in action now in 1 second, you haven't just got unlimited space in the exam. You've got you're given a prescribed amount of space. You might be given 16 lines to write your answer. That generally means you need to use all 16 lines to write your answer there. And one of the most difficult aspects of junior cycle geography then is actually being able to clearly get across your point in those 16 lines. Okay, we're going to get into the depths of answering a few questions here together, and we're going to go through this very explicitly, very slowly, and I suppose what we're going to look to do is slowly transfer the responsibility of learning to you. So what I'm going to put up onto the screen here now is a set of questions from Junior Cycle Geography past paper. And the first thing I'd like you to do is read this section of the question here for me, please. Okay, and after you've read the first part of the question, what I'd like you to do is have a look at the OS map here. And while you look at the OS map, there's a couple of things that I'd like to just point out to you and I'd like you to examine. First of all, I'd like you to examine the multiple rivers that are flowing through the area of the landscape that we're looking at. Second thing I'd like you to look at are the contour lines and the different shading of the OS map that indicates different heights. Third thing I'd like you to look at is the different types of lakes that we can see in the OS map and maybe the surrounding landscape of those lakes. So what I mean is you might look at Loch Nattermore here and you might look at the surrounding landscape here. What's the shape of the mountain like in the background there? Okay, last thing I'd like you to do then is read part C up here, and I'm going to give you like 10 seconds to read that. Okay, brilliant stuff. And what I just like to highlight now, this is question 6 from a past paper on an exam question. What you'll see here is part A, this is part C. So our structure of the question was very evident here. Now I've left out parts of the question, the short answer questions, if you will. We're going to script it or skip straight to part C, which is a knowledge-based question. And it's a difficult knowledge-based question, so we're going to examine it together. So when I flick onto the next slide here, I'm going to look to what that question means. So when I actually went back to this question here, I think it's very wordy and it can be very actually difficult to understand what the question's actually asking us to do. So we're going to read through it together here, and then we're going to look to break it down. So on a hike through the area shown on the map, extract above, your friend asked you how this landscape was formed. Write the answer you would give to explain how the processes of glacial erosion or river erosion shape the landscape shown on the map extract. Refer to the map extract in your answer. So this was supposed to come up nice and slowly here, so I apologize, but it's after jumping for me. But what you'll see here, I've asked you to ignore this first part of it, because I think that can actually confuse a student to ask you to write an answer you'd give to your friend. This isn't an informal environment. This is an exam, and we must write using formal and geographic language to help us achieve and enhance to achieve full marks and enhance our answers. So what I'd like you to focus on is just this part of the question. What the question's basically asking us to do is explain how the process of glacial or river erosion shaped the landscape on the map extract, and you must refer to the map extract in your answer. So we're going to write an answer together. We're going to focus on river erosion. So now we're going to read through the question in its entirety and think about what our answer is going to be. So we have to explain how the processes of river erosion shape the landscape shown on the map extract. Refer to the map in your answer. So what we need to do is explain how river erosion shaped the landscape, and we have to find evidence from the map to support our answer. So now what we're going to have a look at together is the evidence that we can see on the OS map. So this is an area in, I'm not actually sure where this area is after slipping my mind. Does it say for us? Nope. So we'll just go with it anyway, but you can see there's multiple pieces of evidence of river processes on the map. the first evidence of that is that there's multiple rivers flowing through the area. The second piece of evidence here is the presence of contour lines or the mountainous area in the map, and that kind of indicates that the river is in its youthful stage where erosion is most likely occur. So we can almost make the presumption here that we have the source of a river here. Let's just follow this river. We have the source of a river here at the top of a mountain. You can see the contour lines are increasing still. We've got a spot height here that indicates the highest point of the mountain. And I'm going to draw a line down here that follows the river. So we have the river in its upper course flowing down steep slopes down the contour lines. I know there's steep slopes around here due to the tightly packed contour lines that they're close together. The river flows through a lake, flows out of the lake, and then makes its way down the river valley, as we can see. Now, hopefully my eraser will work and it'll get rid of that for me. So I want to actually look at the river. Brilliant stuff. The third piece of evidence we can find on the OS map is that there's a V-shaped valley present on the map. So I can't zoom in on my PowerPoint here, but if we look really closely, what you'll notice, or how I identify a V-shaped valley on an OS map, is that I looked at the contour lines, and if there's a river flowing through the contour lines, and if I look really closely, the contour lines in this area, like follow, I'm not able to change my color, so we're going to say this red line here is our river, and I can identify V-shaped valleys on the OS map as the contour lines almost follow this V shape as the river flows down the valley. So that presence there indicates that there's a V-shaped valley present, and we know a V-shaped valley is formed from the processes of river erosion. So my three, I suppose, pieces of evidence here is that there's multiple rivers flowing through the area. The contour lines show the presence of a mountainous area, therefore the river's in its youthful stage. And then we can prove that given the fact that there's a V-shaped valley evident on the map, and it's evident through the V-shaped contour lines as the river flows down the valley. And you can see I've zoomed up on that there, just where you can really see the V shapes of our contour lines as we go. So what we're going to do now is, or what you're going to do now is basically put your pens, pencils down and listen as I show you a model or sample answer that will achieve as close to full marks as possible for that question. And then we're going to look to answer that question together. So we're going to write our answer to that, and the first thing I'm going to say is, from looking at the map extract provided, the landscape has been clearly shaped by river erosion processes. Firstly, the presence of multiple rivers in the map as seen at the Oberon River at M0264 and the Sranelong River at L9862 prove that river processes have impacted the shape of the landscape. So the first thing that I've done here is name my reason why that river erosion has impacted the region. So I'm going to say that there's multiple rivers in the map. I might get 2 marks for naming here. And then I've made reference to the evidence, or to the OS map, or provided evidence from the OS map to make a valid point and support my answer. So the first thing that I've done there is name the 2 rivers, the Owenbryn River and the Sranelong River. And then I've also given 4 figure grid references to support my answer where those rivers can be found. So I would have picked up my marks there as I progress. Next, I'm going to give my second reason. So secondly, the presence of contour lines along the journey of multiple rivers in the map suggests that the river is in its youthful stages. The typical characteristics of a river in its youthful stage are a narrow river channel, steep sides with vertical erosion impacting the landscape. This would suggest that the processes of hydraulic action and abrasion, I'm going to remove attrition there, that's not correct, are affecting the shape of the landscape. So here what you can see that I've done again, I've got my 2 marks for naming my reason why I think river processes are impacting the landscape. And now I'm going to give evidence to the OS map there. I'm going to give a valid explanation of why I say that. So I talk about youthful stages, I describe what the river might look like, and then I name my processes of erosion to achieve the marks. What I need to do then is provide evidence or reference to the OS map to support my answer there. So I'm going to say there's a V-shaped valley present, and I give a 6-figure grid reference for that V-shaped valley. I talk about how they're found in the youthful stages of a river. Erosional processes cause vertical erosion to take place, and I give an example of where I've seen a V-shaped valley, or an example in my answer to ensure that I'm achieving full marks. So you can see there I've basically used a marking scheme, thinking about the most common marks that are awarded: name, valid point, valid explanation, example, reference to the OS map. There are 5 points. Let me go through that again. You have to name a reason. What our reason why we think river erosion was taking place here was multiple rivers in the region, contour lines indicating the youthful stage of a river. Then we have to give valid points. We have to explain our valid points. We have to give evidence from the map, and then we have to give examples. So I've used the most common marks awarded to maximize or enhance my answer to ensure that I'm achieving as close to full marks as possible there. Okay, what we're going to do next is, excuse me, I'm one step ahead of myself there. What we're going to do next is, sorry, I don't know what happened to my PowerPoint there. What we're going to do next is look to answer the following question individually now. So it's a very similar question to the question that I've answered, just using or we're applying the same knowledge to a very similar question. So first things first, let's read through it together. So with reference to the OS map, explain how fluvial erosional processes have impacted landscape development in the Glendalough area. And my pro tip to you is to use the previous success criteria to structure your answer. So the first thing that we're going to look at together is a screenshot from an OS map from Glendalough. Now, what I'm going to do is give you 10 seconds to think to yourself, what evidence is there on this OS map that river erosion is taking place? And once again, pro tip, think about how I answered the previous question. Okay, 10 seconds. Okay, brilliant stuff. Now let's point them out together. So the first thing that we're going to be looking for, we're going to look for the same 3 things that we've seen in the first OS map. So we're going to look for the presence of multiple rivers. So let me put this here. So number 1, we see the presence of multiple rivers flowing through the landscape. That's evidence that fluvial or river processes are taking place. Second thing we're going to look at is at the presence of contour lines and spot heights. So it indicates that we're in a mountainous area. Therefore, we can draw the conclusion that the river is in its youthful stage or in the upper course, where erosion and vertical erosion are the dominant processes. Third thing we're going to look at is for the presence of a V-shaped valley. So if we look at any of our rivers here, really let's zoom in on this one. If I look at the contour lines, they're following a very, maybe not prominent V shape, but still a slight V shape that indicates that V-shaped valleys are present in the area. And we can draw the conclusion then, because V-shaped valleys are formed from the process of river or vertical erosion, therefore that river erosion is the dominant process in the landscape. So there's our 3 pieces of evidence that we're going to use. Now we're going to look at some success criteria to help us answer this question. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put 10 minutes on the clock, and I'm going to ask you to write an answer to that question in your copybooks using all the knowledge that we've applied before. Now, what you're going to do to answer that question is use the success criteria given to you here. So the first thing you need to do is state that fluvial erosion has impacted the landscape, or river erosion. Second thing you need to do is outline how multiple rivers' presence suggests erosion has impacted the landscape, and you could give grid references to prove this. Now, you haven't got a copy of the OS map there, so you won't be able to give grid references. You need to explain how the presence of contour lines suggests that the river is in its youthful stage where vertical erosion takes place. I'm going to get rid of that because you don't have the OS map to hand, so you won't be able to give grid references. And the fourth thing you need to do is identify a V-shaped valley on the map, explain how this proves erosional processes are at work, and then the best practice or the best answers there would give a 6-figure grid reference to answer that question. So you're going to use your success criteria to answer the questions that has been asked. I'm going to put 10 minutes on the clock here. And I'd like you to prepare an answer into your copybook. Your answer should be anywhere between 12 to 18 lines here, 10 to 12 words per line. So 10 minutes starts in 3, 2, 1, and good luck. So you've just under 5 minutes, folks. Last minute, folks. You should be finishing up your answer now. And time's up there, folks. So we're going to keep moving with today's session. So hopefully you were able to write a full fully developed answer there that would have achieved as close to full marks as possible. And if you struggled even with the success criteria now, what I suggest to do is go back to my sample answer and self-assess your answer against my sample answer to make sure that you're doing the correct things. But the success criteria also gives you this kind of natural checklist that you can tick off. Okay, have I done those 4 things? And if you've done those 4 things, you're on the right tracks to achieving your distinction level answer. What we're going to have a look at next is a different type of question, and we're going to follow a very similar process to what we studied before. The process we're going to study is we're going to break down the question. We're going to break down the question. I'm going to model a sample answer to you. So this is how I'd answer the question. I'm going to give you success criteria to answer the question by yourselves. I'm going to put maybe 7 minutes on the clock. You're going to write your answer, and then you'll self-assess your answer against mine. So the first thing that I'd like you to do is, let's just make sure I haven't got this blown up. No, I don't. First thing I'd like you to do here is focus your attention towards this picture in the exam question. So you can have 5 seconds to look at that picture. Okay, so let's have a breakdown of what that picture is together. So if I'm looking at this picture or looking at this source or stimulus, what I'm trying to analyze is what's going on here. So I can see we have our coastal area at X, we have our road infrastructure at Y, and I suppose what's happening in the middle here is we're seeing coastal erosion possibly impacting road infrastructure in an area in, I think it's in the west of Ireland here. This photograph is taken from. But what we can basically see is that there is cliff collapse taking place, and that cliff collapse is going to impact on settlement and road infrastructure in the local area. So what I'm going to get you to do next is read the question that's given to you here, and there's a good bit of reading here, and we're going to break that question down together. So we'll actually read through it together. So you are concerned about the future of this area and that there may be a collapse. On the next page, write a letter to your local councillor suggesting how the coast could be protected from further erosion. Your letter must include each of the following: an example of a coastal defensive measure that would be suitable to protect the area, an explanation of how that measure you named will protect the area from the processes of coastal erosion. So what we're going to do here now is break down that question. So if I'm to break down that question, there's a lot of unnecessary wordage, I'm going to call it, in that question that we can kind of remove. So I'm going to remove this first line: you're concerned about the future of this area. That's not really applicable to the answer you're going to write. On the next page, write a letter to your local councillor. I'm going to remove that as well. I don't want us to follow this strict, it's not an English exam, we're not going to follow this strict kind of letter writing approach. When you look at the marking scheme for this question, there's literally no marks for your ability to write a good letter. Your marks are available for geographical knowledge, so we're going to focus on that. So the question basically asks you to suggest how the coast could be protected from further erosion, and there's 2 things you need to do. Give an example of a coastal defensive measure that could be suitable. You could talk about rock arbor, gabions. I suppose there are 2 big measures that we're going to reduce the rate of erosion in this coastal area, and then you need to explain how that coastal defense measure will protect the area. What you'll notice, you're given a huge amount of space, so I think you're given almost 20 lines here to write your answer. So we need to get as close to filling that space as possible. So in order to fill that space, we're going to talk extensively, or we're going to talk in detail about the processes of coastal erosion. We're going to talk about the coastal defense measure that we're going to suggest, and we're going to explain how that will reduce coastal erosion in the area. So let's have a look at the model answer together. So the first thing I need to do is suggest a suitable coastal erosion measure that would reduce erosion in the area. So one example of a coastal defense feature that would be suitable to protect the coastline from further erosion would be gabions. Next thing I need to do is explain what gabions are. They're steel wired cages filled with stones that are installed at the coastline. Now I need to explain how gabions would reduce coastal erosion here. So erosion is occurring at the coastline here as hydraulic action and abrasion break down the rock. So what I've done here is name the processes of erosion, of coastal erosion, that are actually impacting the landscape in the picture. Now I'm going to explain those processes of erosion. So I'll explain how hydraulic action is the force of waves breaking down rock, and abrasion is when rocks and other materials carried by the sea are picked up by strong waves and thrown against the coastline, causing more material to be broken. Next thing I need to do now is explain how these gabions would reduce these processes of coastal erosion. So gabions would be a suitable measure as they would slow down erosion by breaking the power of the waves and preventing abrasions from taking place. As the waves hit the gabions, they lose energy, thus reducing the rate of erosion experienced at the coastline. What we're going to do together here now is mark this answer together. So if you go back to what that question was asked, remember it asked us to write a letter. You can see in my model answer here, I've got no aspects of a letter because there's no marks available for that. So what we think back to our most common marks awarded, we had naming, processes, features, and landforms, valid points, valid explanations, and examples. So that's what we're going to be looking here. So the first thing that I've done here is that I've named this is a suitable coastal erosion. I've named a suitable measure to reduce coastal erosion in that area. Other named marks that I'm going to get here as I go down is naming processes of erosion. Next marks that are available are valid points. So here I've got a valid point. Here I've almost got a VP tree. I'm going to call that one a VP tree, which is a valid explanation. So I'm going to pick up my 3 marks here. And here I have my VP tree as well. I'm going to pick up 3 marks here. So getting me as close to full marks as possible. What was also available in that diagram was, or in that answer was space for a suitable diagram. The diagram doesn't have to be too extensive, but you can see the diagram that I've drawn here just basically shows how the gabions could be built into the area where a coastal collapses on the cards, and how those gabions then would reduce the power of the waves breaking against the coastline, and it would reduce the abrasive measures of the waves throwing rocks against the coastline and breaking down rock. Okay, what you guys are going to do now is answer the exact same question using the success criteria that I'm going to give to you now. So the first thing you have to do is name a suitable coastal defense feature. Our suitable defense feature is gabions. Then you have to define what a gabion is. Third thing you have to do is name 2 processes of erosion that are breaking down rock in the picture. Our examples are hydraulic action and abrasion. You have to describe how hydraulic action and abrasion breaks down the rock. You have to explain how gabions would stop erosion, so they break the power of the waves. And if you can do those 5 things, you're on track to a perfect answer. The last thing you could do is include a diagram to show your defense feature in action. So what I'm going to do here is put 8 minutes on the clock. And inside those 8 minutes, your job is to use the success criteria to answer the question that has been given. So your time starts in 3, 2, 1, and we'll self-assess after we finish. Good luck, guys. So you're just coming up to halfway through that question, folks. Last minute, folks. Okay, brilliant, folks. I'm going to get you to stop there. And the last thing I'd like you to do is maybe pause the video here, self-assess your answer against mine, and make sure that we're at the point where we're doing all those things that we talked about: naming, making valid points, explaining valid points, providing reference, and giving examples. If we're doing those things and we're fully developing our answers, we're going to be able to enhance our answers at junior cycle geography. Last thing we're going to do before we finish up is just go through the what's available on the Exam Revision website. So I'm going to show you through my portal here, which is Leaving Cert History, but all of that Leaving Cert History stuff, all the same types of resources are available at Junior Cycle Geography. So we're going to watch the video, we're going to go through what's available on Exam Revision, and then we're going to finish up for today's Saturday session, folks. Thanks so much. Okay, folks, we're going to leave it there. What's available on Exam Revision's website is our video recorded lessons, self-correcting quizzes, distinction level notes. We have our PowerPoint presentations available for everyone. I just want to thank everyone for their time today, and I'd like to see you tuning back in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much, folks.